Choose your fighter.
How you doing, guys? Welcome back to another episode of KPBCast. And today with me, I have what we would like to call, at least in the East Coast, one of the pillars of the fighting game community. I mean, this man's been around for, God knows
Almost.
how long. I've talked to you about the original East Coast championships that we've used to run out here in Jersey. We have with you Matt Luongo, also known as Shock.
What's up, guys?
Shock, thank you for being with us. Really appreciate it. You know, I interviewed you about, I want to say almost 9 years ago when MK9 was
was
here
at,
at VSM, the Gamer's Edge.
Yes, Gamer's Edge. That was like 8 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, and that was really when I first got to know you, and I made such a mistake. At the beginning of that video, it said, longtime UMK3 supporter, but what you really are, you're just a fighting game community supporter. You are a fighting game aficionado.
Okay, more or less.
When did you decide to start taking fighting games, when did you start being competitive in fighting games? When did you decide, you know what? I'm sure it had to be during the arcade days. You grew up during arcades, so why don't you take us through that first?
Okay, so yeah, it definitely started on, I would say, like Super Nintendo, the local, the kids who always thought, they were like the best at every game. That was really when the competitive edge started. Playing against the older brothers of my best friend, that was where I really cut my teeth because they were probably pushing 20 at the time, so they really had like an understanding of fundamentals, Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat 2 in particular. And then when I was old enough to really start going to the arcades, because I was like 11, I think, when Mortal Kombat 1 came out.
Yes.
So when I hit like 13, 14, and like it was really hanging out more, that's when the arcade scene for me really took off with MK3. I was like waiting for that game to drop. I didn't have that anticipation for any game before that, and that's probably why the game has stuck with me so much. And then just traveling around New Jersey, I mean, I felt relatively undefeated in the 90s, and then or in 2000 was when I started really getting interested in going out to tournaments because I didn't even know there were tournaments. That was just not a thing to me.
You say you went, you basically got everything in the Super Nintendo with your friends' brothers and everything. Explain the differences between going from the home console Super Nintendo at the time to an arcade. I mean, because we knew the ports of the games. Obviously, they just weren't up to par to the arcade versions. How much of a big difference for you was there going from a console to an arcade system?
I was an arcade kid first, and then a console kid, so I was never satisfied with home ports ever.
I don't think nobody was. Nobody, not even with Street Fighter 2.
No, but even going back to like Nintendo with like any arcade game that came out, I was an arcade kid. My family would go to Atlantic City all the time, and the arcades, they were fantastic. So I'd play all those games in the arcade first, and then I'd play them on the console, and I would just be, even as like a 7, 8-year-old kid, I'd be like, this is terrible. They were just, the experience in the arcade was just so different because everything in an arcade is seamless. It's made so that there's no downtime, that you're getting what seems like the most for your money. There's like really just like the scenes, like the cut scenes, basically what you would say, like between rounds, very fast, very sure you can speed up everything. On the consoles, it's a little sluggish. Everything's a little more labored. And then the actual translations of the games, that's really where, if you're a serious player, it matters. But the local kids, they didn't really care. They got to play the game at home. They weren't dying to go out to the arcade like I was. So.
And you say you were you say you were an arcade kid. There's another thing that a lot of people sometimes forget to factor in. Just the arcade experience. All those people surrounded by surrounding these machines. Quarters on the little, right there. It's my turn yet. The possibility of possibly getting stabbed because somebody got mad. They got perfected. You don't get that on your couch at home. You're happy. You're drinking some Kool-Aid or something.
No, that's not necessarily true.
What, the stabbing part?
Well, depends. In the case of my best friend's older brothers, they would get very upset if they lost, and it had that same feeling as if you met a stranger in an arcade and you didn't know how to, how they were going to react if they lost, like punching things and throwing controllers and stuff. Yeah, you had to watch your back for the next couple days if you were coming over, because they didn't, they were competitive, and that's similar to the arcade experience. I never had, at least that I was aware of, I never had even what would be a close call, but I did witness some instances where people, I was just like, you might want to back off a little bit, because I don't know where this guy is going with his, with his attitude. So,
No, trust me.
but it was there.
I
Yeah.
know the place I used to play Marvel vs. Capcom, Tekken, and everything. A well-known Mexican gang used to play there as well, and I always knew when to stop. Just beating their asses. Let me just walk out. I want to actually get out with my life intact.
Yes.
It really is a different environment, though. Besides Mortal Kombat, again, going back, you're an arcade kid. So, what was your favorite arcade game growing up?
Oh, geez. I would say WrestleFest was my favorite, my like absolute favorite game, because that's like a hybrid of like a beat 'em up and a fighting game, because there's energy bars in it and it's one-on-one for the most part, unless you do like the Royal Rumble. That game though, I mean, button mashing like you wouldn't believe, but
Right.
it was so much fun. It's indescribable, and I know they tried to remake it a few years ago. They tried to do like a cell phone version of it, and like they kind of had it, just didn't capture the charm though. That's
I didn't
lightning in a
even
bottle.
I didn't even know they tried to remake that game. That's
They did, yeah. They did like a mix of like the old characters and the the ones that were in the game, ones that would have been in the game, and then the more contemporary wrestlers. It just was terrible. It's really the easiest way to describe it. I couldn't believe, I was so excited. I was like, wow, it's like the game's getting like a nod, 15, so many years later. It was like the
Well, that
90s,
happens a
30s.
lot with a lot of these guys and girls or whoever who decides to remake games from a past generation into a new one.
Yeah.
It always ends up like it's not the same. Nostalgia. That's
Mhm.
the one thing
The
that we
passion
love.
wasn't there.
And the new
Yeah.
generation of gamers, they just don't appreciate it, and it's just a mix mash of things.
A perfect example of something being done right and being new is Killer Instinct for Xbox.
Right.
That game absolutely captures the passion of Killer Instinct and takes it beyond to what it needed to be today. That is the only one I can think of off the top of my head that really, really hit it.
No, you're right. Killer Instinct on Xbox is one of the only fighting games from a past generation where you're right. They brought it in and they just captured everything that those generations of players like you and me we loved, but the new generation of players equally loved as well. Not many games like that are made these days, where you could basically mix both generations of players, and it really was such a fun game. Going back to WrestleFest, I mean, I played WrestleFest some. I actually ended up playing more of WWF, excuse me, WrestleMania, the arcade game.
I never played that in the arcade until my friend opened his arcade. I never actually got to play that. I never saw it, not once.
Really?
A lot of that stuff, so weird. Like, I never saw a Killer Instinct arcade cabinet until probably my late 20s. Never saw one. I know that they were everywhere, but just, I mean, the arcade scene after like 1995, just, I mean, it was a stark drop after MK3. MK4, I never played a person in the arcade.
I
Not
did.
once.
It's MK4 and arcade where I used to play. It was fun, but there was just something very clunky about the game.
Oh yeah,
It was.
Unplayable. I don't know how people can get into that game, but
It's
just my.
Is Killer
my,
Instinct considered the best knockoff of Mortal Kombat ever?
I don't even consider it a knockoff. It's definitely its own thing somehow. It's as distinct as Mortal Kombat is from Street Fighter, I think, from both games. It has elements of both, but it has its own complete design and just the rare design and the character models and everything. The music is just, it's a great presentation, but I never got into Killer Instinct as a game, not once.
You grew up in arcades. Give us your thoughts when you started seeing them fade. Did you feel like something within you was taken away from you, or it was just we all knew it was coming, we just didn't want to accept it?
The saddest part for me was that by the time I started driving, there was nothing. There was like, you could find arcades, but like nobody was playing. There was, I mean, mall arcades and like the boardwalks were dwindling. Those racing games started like popping up everywhere. To me, and I know a lot of other people who grew up with arcades, the racing games are like the bane of our existence. Where like once those started popping up, it was over. And
Are we talking
not that
about things like Cruising the
sit
World,
down
Hydro
racer.
Thunder? But I love
Hmm.
Crazy Taxi, so I'll give that one a
Yeah,
pass.
Crazy Taxi, amazing game. Again, that is a, I use this word a lot to describe video games. That is a charismatic, brilliantly designed game, no faults whatsoever. But the sit-down racers, they were ubiquitous at some point. It was probably late 90s, early 2000s, and sucked because that's when I started driving in the late 90s. And I was like, oh, cool, I can go around arcades and actually find people to play. There was nobody to play anymore. So,
So like I said, we just felt like something was taken away from us. But arcade scene dies out. Did you know about the offline competitive community before the arcades died out, or is that something you found
um,
afterwards?
I found out in right around 2000, a coworker of mine, we happened to be talking about gaming one day and how much he loved Mortal Kombat Trilogy, and he told me about Shoryuken.com, and then we started, seeing people talk about running tournaments, and then it was like 2001. Big E was, it was NEC2, and Big E was advertising UMK3, and we were like, oh man, we got to go out there and play, and that's what started everything. The NEC2, that was the first tournament that I ever went to. Now, he had been competing in like mall tournaments for like MK4, MK3. He actually played at this is a local reference. It was the Willowbrook Mall or the Menlo Park Mall. Menlo Park Mall. There was a big scene there in the mid '90s for MK3, and he used to play against Tom Brady, and that was when they were probably like just about 17 or 18, I guess you could say, because they're a few years older than me. Um, but I didn't know any of that was going on, like not a bit. It's such a shame because like I think I would have been a better player if I would have gotten to know people who really knew what they were doing sooner, because all the habits that I developed, they worked in the 90s, they don't work anymore.
No.
So yeah,
Yeah, they don't work when you take it to an offline competition where everybody
no,
who's been doing
not
this
at all.
for a while is like, Jesus Christ. I mean, I'm sure you probably had the same experience that I did. It's like, wait a minute, you could do that? That actually happened. that
Yeah.
I had a crash course in that. Is like, oh boy,
Mm.
Jesus
That,
Christ.
I always love when you hear like, oh, you can't do anything against that. Like whatever the person's like doing, and it's like some kind of like a repetitive action or something like that. Like, oh no, you just gotta wait till they stop. That kind of thing was always what got me. I was just like, really? Like you can't do anything? It's like, oh well.
What was the New
It's
Jersey arcade scene like?
I only knew from my like own like loner traveling. So I don't really know. I didn't know any groups. I didn't know anybody, like any meetups, until I would say Soul Calibur 2, which would have been like 01, 02, probably right around then.
Right.
I think that's right. And that was at the Monmouth Mall. And we had a little group there, and I went for like a few months. I wasn't a huge Soul Calibur fan, but I just wanted to learn. And that's when like people started talking about frame data. Because back then, there might have been, I don't, well, yeah, training modes existed in games, but there wasn't like actual frame data
No,
listed.
there
So
wasn't. No.
yeah, people would take like a VCR and like, and again, VCR, they would advance like the footage like frame by frame and count everything, and then
What's that?
they would, yeah, they, they would post it on like Tech and Zaibatsu and these other sites that were like, they were the resources back then. That's what we had to do. And then eventually they just started putting in the games because enough, hardcore players were vocal about it. But yeah, Soul Calibur 2 was the first game that I played in any kind of like a local
Competitive
group.
environment.
Yeah, like a local group of players, meaning like not like I okay. So like I had a video store by my house that always had a current fighting game. We had like a handful of people there, but nothing serious. But that went on for years. We played everything from like Street Fighter 2 all the way to like I think it was like Marvel versus Street Fighter, I want to say. So like around like 97.
That's my favorite versus
98.
game.
Oh yeah, I love Omega Red in that game. I say my team is Omega Red because I I would never have to use a second character in that game.
I just use Ryu and Ken.
Until I met real players.
Man, Ken's theme song in that game was the best. So was Wolverine's. I really genuinely missed that game. That game was broken as all hell, but what can you do? That was a lot of fun back then.
It wasn't as broken as the rest of them though. They were all broken, I guess.
Well, you know what? You're right. X-Men
Yeah.
versus Street Fighter was probably the
X-Men
most
Street
broken
Fighter
one.
was
That's literally, let's see who can land an infinite first.
Whoever gets the first touch.
There you
That's it.
go. Well, you've
The
been
first tech throw in the that character's
now. You had said your first offline event where you met Big E and Tom Brady. You said that was in 2002.
2001 NEC 2.
NEC 2.
Yep.
Was East Coast Championship still running at that time?
Yes. East Coast Championships I didn't know about, actually. I didn't know about East Coast Championships until 04. So I was like really, I was 20. I guess I was 20 for NEC 2. Yeah, so that's when I really started like hunting around for events to go to. So I didn't know about the break. Nothing. It was because of my age range, I think. I really didn't know about any of the stuff.
Well,
it's like a gap for like knowing about competitive gaming, and before that it was just like wherever I could get to, and then that empty space in the middle of not really knowing that there was any kind of scene, anybody getting together.
Well, I think that's why we sometimes wish the age of information was back in those days, because you could find an event easily today. Back then,
it was, but that was another thing that we just, if you were too young, you just didn't know. So like, for example, like James MK and summoning guys in our MK scene, they were going on IRC and they were in chat rooms and everything way before, like in the MK2, MK3 days. There's even the guy who got me in to the scene, he was on all that stuff. And he was only a few years older than me, which made the difference. I also didn't get a computer until like 1995. And by then, like AOL was like the big thing. And I mean, I talked to people about video games, but never about meeting up and playing or anything. I wish I knew about the IRC stuff, but.
Were you obsessed with AIM Messenger like everybody was?
Oh man, I used AIM until the day they shut it down. Yep.
I knew somebody who, for whatever reason, kept his AIM open for like 15 days. I'm like, is there some sort of like prize that you're gonna get for doing that?
Wait,
I come to find out that he kept it on idle just to have his little screen name with the little guy running, just saying he was there. It's like, what the heck are you doing? I swear to God.
No, I would just I was one of those people who just left my computer running and on at all times too. So I would be like logged in for probably 45, 60 days at a time. But I know all my friends would all log out and everything. Why are you logging out? Like, and then they started.
We gotta turn off the computer.
Yeah, but I never did, because I was always told by like other like geeks, like, oh no, turning off and turning on your computer is not good for it. So
is that what that was?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Who ran East Coast Championships? Do you know?
So ECC was the break, and there is a guy who's resurfaced in recent years, Todd Dwyer. He ran most of those events, so far as I'm aware. But that was right before I got into the break scene. Mm-hmm. So then there were a few other people. I don't really remember their names. I don't really know them. But the one guy who got me into the break and some other tournaments was Jet Fee, who is one of the like nicest guys, welcoming guys that he really like wanted to see the community become something bigger. And again, this is, over 15 years ago. We didn't have nearly what we do today.
Of course not, no.
But he helped me, and we just both had the love for the classic MKs. He was really into UMK3, so we ran a bunch of tournaments. He got us into 2007 was Road to Evo. Evo East, I believe they called it. It was Evo East in Connecticut.
I think I remember that. I think I do, yeah. That's right, because there was Evo West, and I do remember Evo East, and they had a few exhibitions between East versus West, mainly in Marvel versus Capcom 2, because that was the game that basically, they put both coasts together, because that was the game everybody just loved so much. But
I remember walking into that event, and they had a massive projector in the ballroom, and I heard the UMK3 select screen going. I was like, oh my God, somebody's got MK going, and I looked up. It was just a modded Marvel 2. They had the UMK3 select screen music playing on Marvel 2.
Dreamcast?
It was a Dreamcast, yeah, with all the modded colors, like the Ronald McDonald colors and like the purple stuff. And Um, but yeah, and I was just like, this is awesome, and I went into that event not knowing whether or not I was going to be able to run anything because I didn't talk to anybody who was running the event. Fee was just like, just show up. He's like, I'll get you in. Don't worry. And I had like 16 people there for UMK3, and like everybody's standing around, and we're like, what's going on? We hadn't gotten anything. So finally, like Li Joe and like John Gallagher came over, and they're like, oh, we're gonna make this happen. Don't worry.
Were they
So
the
that
ones?
was
Were they the ones running UMK3?
I ran UMK3.
Oh, you did.
But
Okay.
I was invited by Fee, who was also running the event. He was like, I promise I'll get you a table and chairs. He's like, just bring your stuff. Brought the stuff. Had a great tournament. We had like an arcade stick as a prize. There's video of it on my old website. It's probably spattered about on YouTube channels. But that was a really fantastic event because we had like I said, I think it was like 16 players, which is you don't get that for games that people don't play.
Not really, no.
But Xbox Live Arcade was like not quite a year in, so you had that like tidal wave of interest come in. There was like 100,000 people playing that. That was really special at that time, and it really helped us build up. But that guy Jet Fee, he actually was his 40th birthday not too long ago, and we had a get together at the break with a bunch of us. And the guy Todd and a few other people. But like I said, there's definitely other people. I don't know their names, but that scene was what got me the experience for running events. And I would just like call up guys on Long Island and be like, hey, you guys want to come out to the break this weekend, and we'll do some UMK3, and that happened like a few times here and there.
And like you said, that was that was Evo East. Going back real quick to NEC 2. How many players showed up in your estimation when just the whole event overall? Do you maybe have an estimation, or were you just like you were just taking everything in? It's like, wow, I'm here at an actual offline event.
Yes, I entered in 3 tournaments. I was going to enter Marvel 2, and then I played some people in casuals before, and I was just like, there's no way. There's no way I can. I'm not even gonna have fun. I will officially bow out of Marvel 2 competition before I even start. But I did play CVS 2, ex-member Street Fighter, who I actually played Flo in that tournament, and then UMK 3. The Capcom versus SNK 2 signups were at 132, I think. So I would say that there was maybe 150 people there.
Wow.
Roughly, maybe 200. But there was massive overlap between Marvel 2 and CVS 2. But I would say that definitely with the other games, Soul Calibur and whatever, Tekken, whatever else was there, I would say at least 150, maybe 200. But definitely not more than that. That place was jam-packed. It was definitely a fire hazard. And the tournament, the CVS 2, for anybody listening that doesn't know, you think that like Dragon Ball Z takes a while to run. CVS 2 is absolutely brilliant. I guess anybody who knows like King of Fighters would definitely understand this.
Yes.
CVS 2 takes forever. It was run on 2 arcade cabinets.
Steve is here. He's nodding his head because KPB, we run KOF, and it's like, okay, when is this gonna end? He's just laughing like crazy. He knows CVS 2 as well, so trust me, we know. It's like, oh boy, here we go.
So if I don't know what time the tournament started, but if it was Saturday and pool started at noon, which I'm just that doesn't happen, but I'm just saying, like, if it was noon, it didn't end until I want to say Monday morning at like 3 a.m. That was how long it took, and it was almost run continuously. 2 cabinets, 132 players. You're talking an average of 10 minutes per set, easily.
Was there no console port that was arcade perfect at the time?
I want to say, there's a chance it might not have even been out for console yet, because that game came out in 2001, right? Was it?
Yeah, you're right. It did come out in 2001. So the GameCube version hadn't been out yet, and everybody loves the GameCube version as the quote-unquote arcade perfect version.
Yeah. When was PS2, though? Whenever that would have come out. If that came out by December 01, then that would have been an option. But remember, the arcade was the standard at the time still. So even if there was, that really wouldn't matter. But I can't think. I think obviously Marvel 2 would have been out on Dreamcast. I guess there could have been a CVS 2 for Dreamcast, but the Dreamcast was the first one that we really started seeing more and more.
Well,
Console.
Marvel 2, you know.
Yeah,
That was as
it
arcade
was
perfect as you
like
could get. It's funny you mentioned arcade machines being brought to these things, and it just
no, this
is
was just at
amazing.
an arcade.
I'm sorry.
It was just in an arcade. It was at University Pinball. It was just a
Oh,
tournament in an arcade. Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
I thought
It
it
was
was like maybe a little bit convention center or a
no, no,
hotel. No.
no, no. Remember, this was 2001. We that was like just not an option yet. We started though
Yeah,
around
you're
like
right.
yeah, '03 was when we started this little tiny. Well, yes, Biggie. He was running at this tiny little hotel on in Philly off of Penrose Avenue, and this place was just notoriously just unclean. We'll say, and everybody knew it, but we wanted to play video games, so.
It was a 1-star hotel,
Oh man, half star.
minus 5 stars.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. And actually, you do mention that because, yes, now that I remember it, I've actually recently found a YouTube channel that has a lot of the old ECC videos there. I think they sold DVDs of this stuff. And yeah,
Yes.
you're right. It wasn't in an arcade. I believe it was in the break. And just seeing this place jam-packed full of people just goes to show you the passion that this community had even back then. You know what? Arcades are gone. Let's do something. Let's take it. Let's find whatever arcades are available that have the
Yeah.
games that we love. And there was a lot of passion. I mean, watching some of those videos, it really is amazing how much these games brought people together.
Yeah. I believe it was like ECT. It would have been like ECT 9, I think. It was like 2004. I want to say was whatever. I don't remember how the dates line up on those with the numbers, but the fire marshal did have to come in and like rope off everything because you have like a building where the middle of the building is divided by back-to-back arcade machines, and then you have arcade machines on the walls. So you just have these like tunnels that you go through. If anybody's been to like Chinatown Fair, it's packed. So imagine like Chinatown Fair, like two of them basically side by side, and then you have the players, and then you have the people standing behind the players watching, and now you have back-to-back people who are watching games on both sides of the room, and it was just way too much. And that was probably June or something like that, so it was pretty warm. And yeah, fire marshal had to rope us off and limit the capacity on that because there were just way too many people. There was probably at least 300 people for that one, and it's about the same size as University Pinball.
You
So
you
very
mentioned
bad.
you mentioned Chinatown Fair. How many times did you ever get a chance to go down there, considering it was a big central hub for fighting games in New York? I know you're in Jersey, so it probably
Yeah.
would have been a heck of a lot harder for you to get there. But if you've ever
I have,
visited it, what were your thoughts about it?
so yeah, I got to go one time, and I have a decent story, I guess you could say. Um, I'd heard so much about it, and I was like, I gotta go sometime. But it's like it's in the city. I don't like going to the city. It's not my thing. But summoning, whom I really only knew for like about a year and a half, I'd say at the time, he was just like, bro, we gotta go play Street Fighter 4. Street Fighter 4 had just come out. It was like literally like August or like September, I think. It was still very hot out. Um, they had it, and it was like gold. Like this is the new thing because it had been years since Street Fighter had come out, and there was all these like doom and gloom. There'd never be another Street Fighter game, and
It revitalized the FGC
it
basically.
revitalized everything. So we were like, let's go to Chinatown Fair. I was like, I've never been there. And it was like a 65-person wait, I think,
Oh yes.
to get on, and it was $1 to play, and it was a 6-win limit if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So if you won 6, you had to get off. Now um, where we were in the line, we eventually got called to play, and it was like summoning played, and then like I think it was me next, but our opponent was Li Joe. And Li Joe was on his 5th win against summoning, and then he was on his 6th win against me. So he just let me win because he was gonna have to get off no matter what. So then I got to play another guy, and then the third guy beat me. So I got my dollar out of it. That was, if you want to go with quarters, I got my dollar out of it. I was like, okay. I was like, I've had enough of that. Where's Marvel? So, so got a Marvel One machine, and it was next to X-Men vs Street Fighter. And I wound up playing that for about, I would say like an hour and a half or so. I went something like 12 wins in a row against like a handful of guys. And the guy to my right, so I was on the player 2 side, and then the guy to my right was on the player 1 side of X-Men. And we were on for basically an identical amount of time. And I could just feel like the sweat pouring down. It was so hot, and playing, 12 games in a row or whatever. But the entire time I'm playing, I hear this one guy behind me. He's just talking trash. And I'm like thinking to myself, I'm playing like mid-tier. I'm not going nuts. I'm beating all these top tier players who don't really know what they're doing. They just like see like the stuff, posted online, and they can't reproduce like a real winning strategy with like Strider Wolverine or like, one of the Iron Man combinations. And I'm just playing Morgan Chun-Li. And I have this really nasty strategy with Chun-Li that's very hard to get around, and I'm guaranteed they never saw it before, so they were all losing to it. This one guy just keeps saying, "It's like, man, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know how to play. I don't know how he's winning all these matches." And I'm like, just like laughing, and I'm like having a great time, because that was the arcade for me back in the day. And I remember this is 2008.
Yeah.
This is many years past already. To have that like feeling again was so just like refreshing. And then I finally lost, and then the guy next to me lost, and we turned and we looked at each other, and we're just like wiping our faces with our shirts, and like we went and got drinks together, because it was like, we were done. That was one of the highlights, I guess you could say, of that time frame for
Well,
me.
by all means, it was an enjoyable experience going to Chinatown Fair.
Yep.
You mentioned L.I. Joe. How long did you know him? How many years did you know him up until that point?
Maybe like 3, I would say. I definitely ran into him at some tournaments in like 04, 05, maybe 05, and he was this like he was this this like lone MK player. He played Human Smoke, and he would just kind of like show up after the tournament and play, and it would be like, why did you not play in the tournament? Because like he was really good. And eventually we started getting him to play in the tournaments, but that was definitely a few years before that, but not too long. But we had bonded enough, I guess you could say, over the old games, and the fact that he grew up with summoning. He was a little kid, and he was playing, MK3 with them, with his dad bringing him, and he had to stand on the milk crate to get to the controls. So
no, trust me. I remember at a On the Edge event that we did. I mean, again, going back to the VSM days, I interviewed him, and I heard all those stories. And yes, he knew those guys summoning James for a long time. I heard the story of being put on the milk crate. The guy loves his fighting games, I didn't know that, though, that he would actually not enter tournaments. He would wait until the tournament is over.
Very early in the time that I knew him, I guess he probably wasn't really practiced in it that much, and he's very competitive. He doesn't, he don't want to jump into something if he's not going to do well in it. That's, but then, after like a couple of years, and he started playing UMK3, then it was, the rest was history. That was a really important step in getting the old games recognition, because he started running ECT, and ECT was an extreme proponent of the old MK games.
I always find this funny, speaking of L.I. Joe, that a lot of people, I mean, it took what was it, Event Hubs covering your first to 10. We were there for that first to 10 on the MK Classic Collection. A lot of people are surprised that he plays MK. It's like, well, he's well versed in fighting games. He's not a one-trick pony. But
I can sort of explain that. It's because the attention that the old MK games get is just wasn't nearly as much as the new popular games. There's plenty of players who do play other games, and they're just known for being like, he was known as a third strike player before Street Fighter 4 came out. So that kind of like pigeonholes you as a player for a specific type of game. But I mean, he plays a lot of different games. So
yes, he does.
But his roots are MK. Like, he'll tell you that. Like, that's the game, I guess, MK3. I'm sure he played MK2, but again, he's younger than me, so he's like, you figure 8, I guess, when like MK2 was being played competitively, and that's, it's hard to play against a little kid like that, and take it seriously. But that's where he cut his teeth, and that's, learning a game at that young of age is going to make you very, very good.
When
Probably
you
no matter how good your competition is.
when Event Hubs put you guys that first to 10 set on the front page,
Yeah.
what was your reaction? Because it's rare for them to cover any of the old school Mortal Kombat games.
Yeah.
We see a lot of Third Strike, the Jazzy Circuit. We see a lot of Marvel 2 because that's had a revival recently. But again,
Yep.
seeing UMK3 and Event Hubs the front page, I mean, that you must have been like, what? Wait, what? They
I
remind.
thought that was just friggin' awesome. I mean, and then there's probably I would say threefold. It's because the nostalgia is very popular nowadays with everything, and talking about like the old stuff. Not even at the event. I mean, the event was like 6 years ago. But the game itself being old, also Li Joe being attached. I think there was like roughly like an anniversary to it too. So there's like a few different reasons to kind of bring that. And I think also the guy who did the article was also like a fan. So that's also important. But when I saw it, I was just like, this is like such a great acknowledgement, that there was something there. And it also, the scene could use, a little bit of a boost.
Any kind of exposure at this point.
Yeah.
And
I just
by the
thought
way,
that was great.
by the way, I will say it was fun seeing that, but I suggest guys please go and check out the Road to Evil exhibition he had with Li Joe at the old EC3,
was,
ECT3 I believe it was. So much better than the one that Event Hubs did because, as we know, anybody who knows the arcade collection isn't exactly the most perfect port, but it is the easiest to to take around with people.
Yeah, the Road to Evo one was a tournament. That was the grand finals of the
Oh, it
tournament
was.
that weekend. Yeah, that was an exhibition. The guy who was Andy who was running that? I can't remember. That was a long time. It was like 10 years ago.
It's 10 years ago, man.
We got invited to run like me, Phil, and Rob and everybody that was around at the time. They were like, we want UMK3 because the little bit of hype that we had at ECT. And I was like, okay, sure. So we did it. We did the the main chunk of the tournament, probably up until like the top 3, and then they moved us to the stream room. But it was like, I don't know if it was after Street Fighter 4 pools or Super Street Fighter 4 pools, but they were saying, because you don't think people are gonna like stick around and like watch, but like it's the fact that Li Joe is playing #1 in the top 3, and it's also like gotta be vaguely interesting to see like you have a tournament for a game that nobody really knows, like why are they running this #1 and what can be done in this game #2. So I think that was very important, but I know that we had something like 4,000 people watching, I think.
Yes.
And like this is in the infancy of streaming at the time. It's like was 2010. So really it was happening, but it wasn't really, a common thing yet. But yeah, so like, Joe and Simon, AC 1984, he was playing on keyboard too. So everybody was like, in the room, and if you watch that video, you see all the people who are there. How many people are still around in the scene who were there in that room that day? It's like a who's who of like the elites in the scene.
Yes.
It's just a fantastic, especially the reactions. Reactions is just a fantastic video for this nothing game essentially at the time, and boom, right to the top.
I will say one thing about that set that always stuck out to me. It always comes down to the last round. I think that is the only competitive MK game I've ever seen. The match, excuse me, not the game.
Yeah.
That it actually ended in a timeout.
Because
that game moves so fast. People say Marvel 2 moves fast. Play UMK3. Actually, play MK Trilogy. That moves just as fast.
Yes.
For that to basically finish in a timeout and that room exploded, I'm never going to forget that. That was so ridiculously awesome.
Yeah, to get a time over, again, like, it really... Joe and I have a certain play style, and we know each other very well, and even at the time, you don't normally see time overs in UMK. You can jab somebody in the corner in like 20 seconds, and they're, even if they block the whole time and their leg bar is gone. To get a time over like that means that you're moving around a lot. We were using teleporters, so it's like, every hit's just like little 1-2 hits here and there.
Little chip damage.
And then I remember hearing the clock going, and I was like, oh, come on. I was like, this is ridiculous. Because I was like right there, like, it was, and he teleports at that last second. And if we had like 2 seconds left, he was at the perfect like trajectory that I would have blocked it and just punished and won. And of course, he had to have done that on purpose because I knowing Joe, absolutely, he's like, I'm gonna give it to you, but you're not gonna get to do it.
When did you decide you wanted to become a streamer or an organizer of basically everything MK? Because by all means, you are the go-to Mortal Kombat streamer here in this area for Big E or for any other big events going on.
Yeah,
When did you decide to basically take that route?
so I've always been interested in doing production ever since I was a little kid. I used to do I don't know how you would describe it. I guess like my friends and I we would get together, and I'm talking at like 8 years old. We would make like I guess you would kind of call them like unboxings. Like we would have like games and like toys and stuff. We would do like reviews of things. It was like this kind of hodgepodge thing that we would do. And again, like we were really young, but I was like scripting things already at that time. Like this was like something that was honestly just never nurtured in my life, and I wish I had. But I really liked doing production, and it's just that over the years you get caught up in other things, especially with pro wrestling. Is like I wish that I could like produce shows and wrestle on them, but there's no way you can really do that. So you kind of have to choose. And what I did with the gaming thing was I was like, I'm never going to be good at anything new that comes out. I absolutely accepted that, but I do love the scene. I do want to be a part of it. So that's when I started getting more involved in running the events and coordinating the Mortal Kombat events, especially after MK9 came out, because we had that build for like it was getting close to 10 years with the classics, where we started seeing like 32 players showing up for events and hanging out all weekend, and we needed multiple setups, and it was really starting to build. And then all of a sudden MK9 came out, and that basically went away over time. So then I decided, I was like, okay, the streaming is getting big, we need to really get involved with this. And I sort of I don't know if I'm taking credit for this, but I kind of put 995 Phil on the path to start doing streams. And at the same time, when that started building, I started a new job with summoning, and we were kind of building a company at the time, and I really didn't have any time to focus on it. But from day one, I wanted to do the streaming. That was very, very important. And then it took a few years, and we started doing it. But it wasn't something that I could like make a career out of. So it was like a very slow build to acquire, decent equipment, here and there. Like we kind of had decent stuff in the beginning, but then like we weren't used so much that it warranted us like really like, digging our heels in. Like KPB's got like fantastic, fantastic setup going. And I just stuck around, and they just kept using me. Like that's really kind of that was it. Like he was just like, yo dog, I need you for another event. I was like, oh, okay.
What was
So,
the
like,
first event you worked?
Where I was like organized?
Yeah.
Like, right. I mean NEC 3 4.
Wow.
NEC 4 I think was the first one that I really was like responsible for like running a tournament, I guess you could say. And it was just for the classic MK stuff. It wasn't anything crazy. Didn't really get a lot of people. We had to run like Trilogy, I think it was, on like PlayStation. It was complicated back then. You didn't really have like even like computers in general like couldn't really emulate like
they couldn't
MK3.
emulate arcade boards yet, not fully the way it's going on now.
Yeah, they just weren't. I mean, I'm sure if I could have dropped like $5,000 on a PC back then, I could have gotten something that could have done it. But that's irresponsible. Why would you do that at like 22 years old? Go and buy like crazy PC to run a game that's already old at that time.
And it's not as if you're going to be running a tournament every weekend. This is something that you would invest in, something that would probably be used once every 4 months or 5 at most.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish that.
So we eventually, when there was like this kind of like break in technology, I guess it was when like the Pentium 4 came out. And again, I'm showing my age.
Pentium 4. I remember how big that was.
Yeah, I want to say the Pentium 4. That was when they started hitting like the gigahertz. They that was I remember getting like an AMD computer at the time, and it was really solid. And that's when we started actually bringing a computer and a CRT, and like we were starting to get sticks. We had controllers and stuff here and there, and that's when we really started like piecing together like the classic MK stuff. That was like a pivotal moment, was when we could actually like have like an arcade type experience for the game, instead of just having to run like console, like garbage ports and stuff like that. That just wasn't going to be acceptable. So that was I mean, oh god, that was a long time ago already.
Yeah, yes, it was. That's my.
Yeah.
You know, we're
um,
we're here reminiscing about this stuff, and it's just like, geez, how long have you been doing this now?
Next year will be 20 years. Yeah.
20 years, man.
So like I went for like 2 years just to play, and then basically Biggie was like, can you help me get like people to play MK? And there were MK games still coming out at the time, but they couldn't like get people to come out, and I don't know how to describe it, because like MK Deadly Alliance was so different. It was
Yes, it
so
was.
different and contemporary in terms of like, it was a completely new engine. It was completely redesigned graphics. It was, very robust. Um, we just could not get people to come out. Tom Brady was very, very eager to get people to come out for them, because he loves MK. He loves the franchise. Just, I don't know. It was, again, you went from Deadly Alliance, Deception, Armageddon, DC Universe, nothing.
Is it
Nothing.
because
That's a
the
lot.
series at the time, during that time? I mean, listen, for as much crap as they get, the games did make money, but from a
Absolutely.
competitive point, was it
Casual
just
players
seemed
are
as
not
a
going.
joke at the time? No matter how much they tried, you had DC versus MK, you had Mortal Kombat Armageddon,
Yeah.
all that stuff. Was it just seemed like a joke at the time, the series?
I think that Deadly Alliance would have been the game to really bring MK into like the FGC. I mean, we didn't call it that at the time, but like our concentrated gatherings of gaming, like you would think that like this is a game, doesn't have net play, it's brand new. You would think that it would have done it. And I remember the first tournament we did was NEC3. It had just come out, I think. It was very new, like maybe a couple weeks. And we had like a handful of players, but like it just like was totally underwhelming. And as a matter of fact, I remember like it was Tom Brady and like I can't remember who the other guy was, but they literally showed me like a Sonya combo and like one little strategy, and it like worked like a charm. It was like really, and I'd never even touched the game before, and it got me like kind of far into the tournament. Um,
How
but
long? How long were you guys running Deadly Alliance, and with the low numbers where nobody was showing any kind of interest? When did you guys
uh,
decide, you know what, this just isn't working? Maybe there's just more interest in the older classic MKs, MK2,
yeah,
UMK3, where you just said, you know what, it's not worth our time. It's not worth our time lugging around all this equipment. It's not worth the headache of,
so
okay,
the
6 people showed
yeah,
up. That's great. We love that, but it's not worth it. When did you guys realize that?
so for me, like I felt like the reins were already going to be taken over by that community, and they didn't do anything. They There's really no other way to explain it. Like they didn't show up. They didn't bring systems. They didn't bring monitors or CRTs or whatever at the time. Um, there was just not a thing to be had, and the fact that like people just weren't showing up for the new game was very confusing. And I remember at the time, like you didn't have all this history to base on, like attendance just wasn't there. Um, but I mean, I witnessed like one Deadly Alliance tournament, and then I heard about a couple of Deception tournaments. There was an NEC where we ran Deception, but I think I wasn't there for one of the days, if I remember correctly. I remember there being a tournament for it, but I wasn't there for it. And I know that Brady was there, and Jop, and like a couple of people, if I remember correctly. This is like 15 years ago. Um, but after that, I mean, there was nothing for Armageddon. Not a single even inkling of a tournament. And then Brady tried again with the DC Universe tournaments, and he asked me to help him at that point because this was, again, you're talking between '02 and like '08, I guess. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it does.
DC. So you got this gap, 5-6 years of him coming to tournaments, seeing more people every tournament showing up for MK3, and then we started building an MK2 scene on top of the MK3 scene, and then we started building an arcade killer instinct scene on top of that. So he's seeing this like classic arcade scene really taking shape, and here he is trying to push these new games, and he's like, why are people not coming out for the games? And I sat down with him at one of the tournaments. I'm like, dude, if you want these games to happen, you got to advertise, you got to bring the stuff to run it. And he was like, I got a guy, because we were in the Sheridan in Philly.
Right.
He's like, I got a guy, he lives in Philly. He's like, he can bring some equipment out. He's like, can we get this done? I was just like, let's do it. And again, no advertising, you're not going to get anybody out. And then DC Universe didn't see a real tournament I mean, I know there had to have been tournaments for it, but nobody talked about it. Not until MK9 was announced. MK9, like, really was the game that everybody was just like, we got to come out for this. This is it. Got to, get off the pot here. This is the game that people are going to play. So then, in the interim, you have a handful of people who are like, you know what? Let's just give DC Universe a run. And we had like a really good DC Universe tournament. It was like NEC 11, like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So that was good. That was very good. And we had a really great UMK3 tournament that weekend. It was like 32 players, and the top players at the time in the U.S. And then we had another DC Universe tournament in Winter Brawl, and then MK9 came out like 2 months later or something.
Before we get into MK9 and what that game meant for the series and as we call it, the NRS community nowadays, or the MK community, why don't you take us into the Long Island scene? I know you, Phil, Dark Rob, and a few others. You guys were running a lot of classic MK stuff out there for a few years.
Yeah.
Why don't you talk about that a little bit? Take us into that. Like, who organized that stuff? How did you guys all get together? And how long did you run it for?
So I was always big with working with people who wanted to get stuff done rather than competing against them, because you have people who, like, they get very territorial, and it's like, we want to be the ones who run stuff. And as much as people look at me as like the guy who ran the MK stuff, I was always about letting people take the reins and seeing if we could build off it. And unfortunately, it's just the nature of the beast. You have the snowball effect. People get picked up, people fall off. The Long Island scene I attribute to the fact that I was running with L.I. Joe and John Gallagher when they were building up their Third Strike scene, the rebirth of Third Strike around 2007.
Right.
And 995 Phil started catching wind of events. So far as I know, I don't know if I have this exactly right. But he contacted, I think it was John, and I know he contacted me on my old Ultimate MK site that he wanted to run tournaments. So he started running tournaments. I already had guys from Long Island coming out to Jersey every now and then, and also having Summoning, who's from Long Island. He's another, contact. So here I am, this guy from Jersey, and I got all these Long Island people. I'm like, well, screw it. I'm just going to run stuff on Long Island because the people are already there. Why am I going to get, 15 people?
You see a good influx of players coming from Long Island, so it's like, let's just have it over there. It makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we didn't stop entirely here, but like we did like start getting together. There was like a few in Rio, MK Rio. He, he was a big driving force in getting people to, I guess, take the game seriously because he's such a good player, and he also moved on. With MK9, it had like a paradoxical effect. Like, oh, this guy is really good at MK9, but he's also really good at the old games, and he's very young. He's only like 18 or 19 at the time.
Oh, yeah, Rio, anybody who's ever seen him play, we know how much of a beast he is.
Yes. So all of that like wrapped up into this like side attraction for these games. And then Phil was running under the Castle Golf events. kind of like co-running, I guess you could say, because like, we just wanted people to come out and play, and we also did the events from his house, and we would stream a little bit here and there, and then he and Rob, they like spearheaded that VSM movement, which was such an organic concentration of players. It was just a fantastic, again, like lightning in a bottle. Like that's.
I was there every Thursday. Trust me, I saw it, and that
you can say, because I was only there a handful of times.
you were only there, if I remember, maybe 4 times.
Maybe, yeah, maybe more, but yeah, it was not many. But I tried my best to make sure that kept going and keep the motivation and everything. The turnouts were just like something like, again, it was like the old arcade days. It was very similar, but everything being on console, this being the only difference. But seeing people just making those connections and like really forming like that community, and like there's like brotherhood, all this stuff is so important for developing a scene. And I don't know how you could reproduce that today.
You can't. You really can't.
And the quality of players there. I mean, you would have a night at VSM, and the top 8 for like a 24-player VSM tournament, you would see most of those guys in the top 8 at a major, or whatever you would call a major at the time.
Myself not included. I went there for the beer and the wings. No, trust me, I know. If nobody, especially people who played MK9, because again, that game was so big for this community, VSM, it really truly was a special place. Like you said, every week, even on days where we would only get 12 players, some of the people who would just go out there and play, it's some of the world's top best players. And like you said, even the 24-person tournament, the one night I did interview you over there, I mean, we had close to 30, 32 people there. I remember that night very, very well. And
it's a week.
Yeah, it was a weekday. It was Thursday nights. And the fact of the matter is, the guys who owned the store, the Gamers Edge, they actually had to shut down the power on us. We were all willing to give them an extra $20 because I'm pretty sure everybody wanted to stay there till 6 in the morning. That scene, that scene was just beautiful. It really was. Some of the best times of my life within the FGC were at VSM.
Yeah, it's just a special thing, and I firmly believe, and I know. It's funny, like there's just people's like perceptions and like how they think about a person, what their opinion is. I feel without VSM that MK9 would not have gotten the traction that it did in the scene. I really, really believe that. It was a dependable stream every week, hundreds of viewers every week. I know I like went back and like looked at all the old stats for the website like a couple of years ago just to see. I was just like, I'm curious, like, because I didn't really get like that info, that feedback. And as a person who is like, because VSM was under the banner of Kombat Network, it was an extension of it, and I felt like too remote at times from it, especially because like this is a brand that I developed out of other brands. And it Kombat Network kind of like fell into my lap after an attempt to like unite the scene failed, I guess you could say. And I was just like, well, we got this idea. I'm not letting it go. And developing, into VSM, super, super important. The main reason for that, I feel, is that it set a bar for players who were across the country, to like, we gotta beat these guys and develop our own little, I think it was like Texas and Arizona, Ohio.
At the height of MK9, so at the height of MK9, everybody basically said there were 2 scenes. There was VSM and there was Galloping Ghost Arcade. I forget, are they in Ohio? Or they're in the Midwest.
Chicago.
But like you said, VSM was such a driving force. And I know, it's MK9. Not many people. This is, Street Fighter 4 is out. MK9 had its big following, but like you said, without VSM, that game probably would not have achieved what it achieved. Because I always remember the GGA, Galloping Ghost Arcade crew. They played against the VSM crew at an exhibition at one of those. Maybe it was the season beatings. And everybody from that community was watching because these were the 2 biggest communities. And then, like you said, here comes Texas, Arizona, which I believe that's where Detroit Balling was at. He was trying to organize, and yeah, Scar from Texas. But again, it's VSM, then it's GGA, then it was everybody else. That scene was ridiculously important for the growth of that game, for the growth of the community, by all means.
Yep, absolutely. I think everything spawned from there. After Injustice, definitely it just became its own animal. There's no doubt about that. But I don't think anything would have happened for MK if it didn't happen by MK9. I don't think it ever would have built nothing like what it was. But the Injustice scene was like, it was similar, but you could feel like the drifting, I guess you could say. It
Yes.
started real like, yeah, but that's what happens when a scene actually has growth and there is real like development. And also some of the players from VSM, they started like breaking off into their like more elite, groups, and it wasn't, as important. The stream was also just not as consistent. It just wasn't there all the time. But again, looking at it from a person like developing a brand, and in the sparest of spare time, like I really, really, really wish I could do more. But it just, just doesn't happen.
I remember interviewing you all those many years ago. Were you part of the MK9 development team? Did you get? I don't know if it was you. I know Tom Brady said he was there, because I remember he interrupted our little interview. But were you part of the group of players?
Yeah, I was one of the invited. I guess you would just call it like QA, but we were told we were coming in as balance testers, which to us sounds like we're gonna scrutinize the gameplay and we're gonna try to make this like a good game. But it was sort of like a mix between bug testing and like the game's like integrity, meaning like, is this like going to be something that's playable, not so much of like this move is too fast, this move is too powerful, things like that.
Is it because they didn't understand that terminology?
They did, but that's just in my opinion, they had heard enough of people saying that their games need to be tested, and they were like, let's just appease the community. And there was a lot of pushback internally. Now, from what I know, Brady was testing for a while. He was testing like as early as like late 2010, which would have been probably 3-4 months before we came out there.
Right.
And I was on a ride home from NEC. It was NEC 2010, and I was driving Czech, who's Czech 4900, I believe he goes by.
Mm-hmm.
He is a combo artist,
Yes,
very well known.
Mm-hmm.
He went to the event, and I'm driving him home, and he says to me, and I don't know if he had like information or he just blurted it out, but he says to me, he's like, I really think we're gonna do something big, man. I really think that we're gonna like be involved somehow, like with the new MK. And I was just thinking to myself, I was like, that doesn't even sound like remotely feasible to me, because you don't think about, like, you think Warner Brothers, right? You don't think that like this is just a company that Warner Brothers has make a game.
Yes.
You think about it as something much larger than what it is, and obviously not taking anything away from NetherRealm. It's another thing to be like, this is a company in crunch time. They want to make sure their game is good. We got to get some pro players out here to kind of put the seal of approval on it. That's kind of what I thought we were going out for, but not exactly. So anyway, getting to the point here, Brady was the driving force for getting out more players. And I believe, I don't know what kind of contact or what kind of, inside, baseball that Tim Static had at the time, but he definitely had prior knowledge, because I was sitting in my car about to go to the bar one night, and I get a text from Tim Static, and he goes, expect an email within the next 24 hours. And I was like, what does that mean? I was like, and then I actually got a phone call the next day at work from, at the time he was working, Hector Sanchez, right?
Yes, Hector Sanchez, the NRS guy. What was he? Works in quality or something?
Developer, or whatever they would call it. He was one of the high up guys with Paulo at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And
they used to always be on the stream together. They actually would sit down and watch the stream.
They cared. They really cared.
Yes, they did.
And Hector was like, hey, he's like, we're recruiting testers and everybody that I've talked to so far, because it was basically like a chain. Like Brady was like, you got to get out this guy and this guy or whatever, and then they would talk to those guys, and then he would be like, do you have any suggestions? Okay, you got to get out this guy. He said every single person he talked to said that we got to get you out here. I was like, that's a really like, it's a really nice, gesture from all the guys that were, picked to test. So I'm assuming I was like the last one that they called in. And he's like getting into everything and real, like setting everything up. And he's like, oh, wait a second. He's like, you do want to do this, right? I was like, hell yeah. I was like, get to test a Mortal Kombat game. Like that's something I never even would have expected. And here it is.
How many of you guys were there?
There was like 9 of us. Let me think. Okay, so we had like a non-disclosure at the time. We all took it very, very seriously. And then, as you know, with Injustice, it was complete. Just everybody was just letting everything fly. We treated it like it was as
Ban the
important
testers.
Yeah, exactly. So it was me, Brady, and Czech, which we all had the same flight because we're all from Jersey.
Yes.
And so we all showed up at the airport and we're all like sitting there like, oh, funny meeting you here, because we didn't talk to each other. We didn't know. And then it was Conqueror from Utah.
Yes.
And then Mo 30W and Thrower from Chicago.
Yes.
Jason Wilson, who is an MK2 guy, and he runs an arcade now in like Tennessee, I think Tennessee. He was out there, and then Crazy Bone from San Diego, I think
I've heard of him. Yes.
Yeah, he's a TYM founder. And I don't know if I'm missing anybody else. I think that's about it. Is that
Storms wasn't there, was he?
Who's it?
Storms.
No. So that was basically the community crew, and then we had there was a couple salaried testers who they had almost no part in anything that was going on. But yeah, we tried to apply like as basic logic as possible without requiring them to change much of anything. So we would just tell them like, this just needs to be slowed down. This needs to do more damage. This needs to do less damage. This character's too many frame traps. And it just started compounding, and then they started getting mad at us because like we were being a little bit too, too just pro about it, I guess you could say.
Yes.
Like
you guys were looking at it from a competitive side. You weren't looking at it as Jimmy online who's gonna be playing when.
That's why we thought we were there. We thought we were there for that, but we weren't. So it was,
How long were you guys there for, and how many hours a day were each one of you guys working? Were you working with different teams? Was maybe one of you was assigned to, hey, tell us what, maybe there's a graphic that's off, or was it all just gameplay that you guys were all specifically there for?
It was a mix. We were there for 4.5 days.
4.5 days.
4.5 days, which is not a lot.
No.
We were only slated to work like a normal work day, but they were like, you guys don't have to go home if you don't want to, and we'll pay you overtime. So we were like, okay, no problem. So we worked from like roughly like 10 a.m. to like 1 a.m. just playing, and it was like once it hit the end of the day, like the actual work day, then we could really like just kind of like do what we wanted. But they gave us like a little bit of bullet points to like look at certain aspects of the game, and they had like a short list of like the things they knew that was really wrong, but there were things that we were finding that because of our like OCD, like we could not get past. So like we're trying to play real matches, which was not supposed to be a focus. And we're like, look, like we can't play a real game because there's this like certain like horrific like advantage that a character will have, and it's like, can you guys fix this? Because they were fixing stuff and giving us updates. I mean, not in real time, but like they'd be like, hey, we're gonna do another update today. We're gonna try to put whatever you suggested, or however they would have phrased it to us, because that honestly really didn't happen too much. But eventually they had to have like a sit down with us, and it was like, guys, you can't be working together, can't be playing against each other, and that lasted for like the rest of that day, and then it kind of just went like went back to that.
Did that sort of sour your view on the way gaming development is? Because in the last few years, in the last few, last year, last few years, decade, so many people
Yeah.
are looking at game development and they're starting to see it's like it's not fun. No,
It
nobody
is.
is there really to try to enjoy themselves. At least people who, because testing, especially by pro gamers, is so prevalent now. But for
Yeah.
you, even at that time, again, you said 4.5 days. They got mad at you because you guys were basically, you guys were doing what you knew. It's like, you want us to test this game, so obviously I'm going to be playing against somebody else. Okay, it's going to be in a competitive scene, but we're still
Yeah.
doing it for the betterment of people at home. Did that sour you on, how game development goes?
I'll tell you when I did get soured was when one of the guys, I don't know, God, I can't remember everybody's names. I want to say it was like John's, can't remember what the hell his name is. Okay, so Brady comes up to me and he's like, Shock, can you come with me real quick? He's like, we got to talk to the like programmers or something like that, because like this is bad. And I was like, okay. I was like, I didn't know what was going on. So we went to this side room where there's just like, a handful of like guys, like, doing, I guess, the programming or whatever. And then Brady just says to the whole room, he's like, hey guys, can we talk to somebody who can like change something about this game? Because it's unplayable. I was just like,
I
oh my
remember
God.
that. I remember
Just
him
walk
talking
out.
about
Yeah.
that. That was awesome.
I walked out of the room and I was like, we're done. I'm like, they're gonna ship us off and we're done. And that's when Hector had to, like, he blew up at us. He was really pissed about that. But then between that was when I got soured. Now, Hector doing that was totally understandable. I have absolute understanding of the way that kind of business works. But the other guy said to us, he's just like, you guys, he's like, I don't know why you think you're here. He's like, but you're not going to change anything. And I was just like, what? I was like, I thought we were here. And this is me talking to him. I'm like, I thought we were here to balance test this game. I'm like, why are we here? And that's when I was like, I need to know, because I'm not going to waste my time trying to find
Yeah.
Infinite and, like,
Why are you
frame
there? Exactly. You were invited. It's like, hey, let's bring Shock in. He knows what he's talking about. And for somebody to tell you, it's like,
yeah.
you guys were not brought in for this. It's like, so why am I here for? Somebody please
Hector
explain
said
it to me.
Yeah. Hector said to me when I was on the phone with him, about coming in, he was like, I've researched your stuff. He's like, I wouldn't be talking to you if I didn't think that you should be here, like, legit, I think he said. So that made me think that, like, oh, cool, like, we're really going to be able to scrutinize the game. And once I heard that from him, not Hector, from the other guy, once I heard that, I was just like, okay, so this is still cool, right? It's cool, still cool experience, but it's not what I thought it was going to be. We did find things in the game, though, just naturally, like the way like gamers like pick up on little things here and there, like, ooh, that was weird, like, let me go and try, like, see if I can reproduce that, like that kind of stuff. Like, we did, like, I found this one bug for it had to do with the cinematic, like the transition from like the gameplay to like the cinematic for the X-rays.
Yes.
Are they called X-rays in that?
Yeah, they were called X-rays.
So I was messing around with Quan Chi, and I noticed, because they asked us specifically, they were like, can you guys try the tag mode out? Because they really just wanted to make sure that the tag mode was functional, because that's something that can be very, very easily broken.
There's a reason why that was not a tournament mode.
So I'm playing as Quan Chi, and I think I had noticed like something about the cinematic mode and being able to like move the character. So then I was like, oh wow, I was like, you can move the other character while he throws like a skull at you in that one. And there's like this little animation that happens, and I noticed on the other side that the character could move, and I was like, ooh, I'm like, that's bad. So I went to tag mode, and I'm like, I'm like, can I tag out in between? And you could. So he would throw the skull, and you could tag that guy out, and then the next character would come on and take the rest of the damage for the X-ray. So in tag mode, you could like if you had like time right, you could trade that out there. And then I tried to see if you could hit him before he killed you, which you could, I think, with Ermac. I think you could do the force push. I think you could hit him with that. You wouldn't. I don't think there's any way to test that. I don't think that came out in the original. I don't think that was in the original release, which would have been like the day one no patch. They probably took it out before that. But I'm pretty sure that you could hit Quan Chi, but he wouldn't like. He would only take damage. But I'm sure that you could kill him though, which would have been a terrible bug to have on day one. But things like that, and there was some kind of like Sub-Zero glitch where like if you did like the ice clone in the corner, like the character would be like stuck on the upper half of the plane, so they'd be like walking like the Sub-Zero would be down here and like they would be like walking above them. They got rid of that immediately because that's obviously to like a programmer or developer like that cannot be in the game. That's looks terrible. Who cares if Liu Kang can frame trap you with a 2-hit combo? It's that's
Well,
neither here nor there.
So you did that. You went and tested the game. If you want to look at it, MK9
Yeah.
comes out. MK9 is a huge success. They completely revamped the storyline. The storyline for MK9 was really amazing, very well done. But what that game did for the competitive scene, you were there. How much interest did from the community itself? The MK community that you already knew existed. Again, like a lot of people again don't really understand the impact it had, especially for an offline competition. Again, you were there. Was it right away? Did you notice, man, this game is just gonna revitalize everything for us, like Street Fighter did for the community in general, for the FGC? Excuse me.
Yeah, I was realistic about it because like people who love the NRS scene on like it's a different level. Like I love the scene as like a whole, but then there's people who like get personally offended if the game's not properly respected, and it's up to the community to make sure that happens. So early on, and MK9 was getting decent numbers. I think I want to say like we had like in the 70s roughly, which was like for for the time, that was a pretty decent turnout for anything. I mean, like Street Fighter was getting like 250 players or whatever for but I expected that. Then like we hit like 90 at seasons beatings. I was like, wow, I'm like, this is really starting to take off. Like this is finally going to be the game. And then as soon as the like Injustice announcement came, everybody just kind of like, I mean, there was like a little bit of like a last hurrah we had at that NEC, but like I could tell, like, okay, this is a new community, like to like fighting games in, I should say like the scene, not maybe to fighting games in general, but there were a lot of people actually who were new to fighting games for MK9 and Injustice in general. So you have people who don't really like know like the etiquette, and also like just willing to drop a game for another game. So with the Street Fighter community, it's weird. Like we still had a scene for like Third Strike and CVS2 and like Super Turbo, like all these old games. They just have these scenes that aren't going to go away. But then like Street Fighter 4 was around for, I mean, it was around for how long? Like without another game.
7 years.
Yeah. So there was nothing in the Street Fighter franchise to compete with it directly. So you have like the Marvel games and everything like that they're just gonna have their own base. They're just gonna be there. And I noticed it with MK9. I was like, God damn it, this is how it's gonna be. They're gonna be all these players are gonna go away, and then we're gonna get another wave of new players in, and then Injustice had a really, really, really big turnout for basically every tournament, I think, for that whole season. And then when they announced the next MK, gone.
Yeah, they're all gone.
So that to me, like, this is important in terms of the impact that the games have. They just don't really, they don't have staying power, and there's a reason for that, and it's because of the cycle of how fast they come out with new ones. I don't know if Street Fighter could possibly pull that off though, and still maintain that like, shining popularity. And as we can see with Street Fighter 5, it didn't. It's just not the same. It really isn't. And I don't know if it's because people are just more accepting to play online, It's just not. It's just totally different. Street Fighter 4, it's like the genesis of the scene in general, not just Street Fighter, but like boom, and then Street Fighter 5 feels kind of like Exodus to me. It's like not really, you know, it's not good. I felt like every time for the MK or for the NRS games that we had the boom and then gone every single time, and it's like where's the MK stuff? What happened?
And
And
unfortunately, because again, you're known as the NRS streamer in these parts of the country, you have no choice. That's
yep,
just the way things are because
I
nobody.
like
Yeah, once
yeah.
everybody abandoned MK9, it's not. I mean, you guys sometimes run MK9 tournaments, but I'm pretty sure you've completely dropped them. But again, you
Yeah,
have no choice because we all know everybody goes migrating from one MK game to the next Injustice game to MK, and then to the next Injustice game.
and I understand that. Yeah, I understand. There's no it's no fault of the community, I guess, but more is like this company NRS is they're gonna release their games because they have they have to do it. It's part of their contract. But they're not making games for competitive players. They're making games to be sold by the millions.
Yes.
So there's no excuse to like to saddle yourself with the demands of like a handful of players. um if they want to play the game, they're going to play it. You know what, I gave somebody an example of like how much people scrutinize the engines for the MK and the Injustice games, and you have some people who really love them, and then you have, I think, a lot of people who don't, but they just play it anyway. um if you were to make a different game with the MK engine that they've been using, I don't think anybody would have a problem. They would be like, "Oh wow!" Like take any other franchise, like obviously like with like Ninja Turtles. If you made a whole Ninja Turtles game using the either the MK or the Injustice engine, I think people would look at the game differently. I think it would have more of an interest. But there's this standard with the MK cast, like the I guess the source material and the DC characters, where everything has to be at this like high level that they're never ever gonna get, because that's not why they're making these games. Is really what it comes down to. Is Street Fighter's different. Like they are trying to make a game that's wildly competitive. That's definitely a thing.
Well, they have their own E-League, basically.
Yeah. Uh, but the issue with say Street Fighter is that there has been a watering down that's really affected it, and a lot of the older players just they look at it like this is it's just making it's making more availability to the casual player, and that's not going to get tournament turnout. It's just the people are never ever going to do it. So it doesn't make any sense to us why they would like make all these things, especially like comeback factors and stuff like that.
But the thing
um
is, that's always been an interesting argument that I've always had with a few people. Well, if you open it up to the casual crowd, it's not doing us any favors. But I mean, the competitive scene is still going to be there. Just because the
yeah
game has been made more simpler, it's not as if, oh my god, well, why should we even play this game if it means a whole bunch of casual players are going to come in? Look at Marvel 3. Marvel 3, I mean, Justin Wong was still a top player. The top
yes
players were the top players. So it's always been a weird argument because it's not as if, again, Jimmy, who sits on his couch all the time playing offline mode with his little brother, he's not coming over to an ECT or Evo and he's not rocking the game. I mean, those players are such a rarity where they could go from online to offline and actually be ridiculously good. So I've
yeah
never actually understood that argument because, like you said, these companies are trying to make more money. They can't just cater to the offline audience, which is
yeah
I understand the problem that you guys had with NRS when you guys went to go test those games. But again, it's just an argument I never got really behind. But that's just me.
it's just that people think that like this is what I'm interested in and everybody else I'm around is interested in, but they don't put into perspective that like they're not getting the sales from our community that they are from every other gamer. There's no reason to ever really say like we got to make this game so complex and so like have so many options. It's like the average gamers, they're not into it. They just want to play stuff. They want to see fatalities. They want to be able to feel like they're doing something in the game, which is why they do water the stuff down. And I feel that particularly in the NRS community, that's been a problem. And I think it's because it's not new gamers, but new to the scene. Just thinking that like our games should be number one because it's new, but it's like if your game's only getting a quarter of the turnout of the most popular game on on the card, it's it's not going to get the top showing. Or in more recent times, it's how much money the developers put into the bonuses is what determines what gets the most attention. So I don't know. Like I said, it was MK9 was magical, and then after that, it was like it just got different. I don't know. It was still fun up until MKX. I think I would say most people would agree.
Is it the community's fault that the fun was taken away?
Yeah.
What is the NRS community in 2020?
I don't know. I really don't know. I'm so far removed from. So Injustice 2, I would say, really, because the NRS scene was being run by the developers, I guess you could say, in terms of like the competition, it really like pushed me out. I didn't get to really be involved and keep like my my contacts with people and my just having that presence is very, very important. And I was streaming other stuff, so people would still come and say hi, but all and play on all my systems and everything too, because I was still it's part of my job for the events. But I really don't know personally what happened, but there's definitely like anytime I just randomly try to like sink my teeth into like what's been going on, I don't have any interest, none whatsoever.
You take a foot in and then basically you see what's going on and you say, you know what, I'm out of here. I'm at an age where I don't need any of this. You guys could keep all your childish stuff.
Yep. Oh, I've totally aged out of any drama. And I think some people like misunderstand like how I respond to things. Like they think that I know I get from some people they think like there's this like ego, but I'm really more like trolling people in a way, like very, very subtly. And mostly I do it to try to see if they say something, because then I know who to trust, because it's a very important thing in the scene is like trust factor. It has gone out the window. It's really, really just awful, and it's for no reason at all. I don't know. Once everything starts coming back, to some some semblance of order, I don't know like where we're gonna be, because I mean, really, everybody's just playing online. That's it, just playing online. And I know people are dying to really start getting tournaments back, but I think MK11 is a complete loss at this point. Just have to wait until the next game. I don't know if is anybody talking about Injustice 3? Is that going to happen?
I couldn't tell you. You kind of pointed on something that everybody's waiting for all these offline tournaments to start, because again, offline tournaments by all means, it's just a weekend getaway to get together with people that do the same thing that you love.
Yep.
You're still in the FGC, even though you said, you have 1 foot out. What are your thoughts with everything that's been going on lately with all these accusations, I mean, there are some players who have actually come out and admitted that they are guilty of what they've done. I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you have any thoughts on it, or is it something along the lines where you don't have an opinion because you don't know these people? You've been in this for so long. I wouldn't know what you've seen. I've never really, we've never really talked about this. I have no reason to. We talk so much about everything else: wrestling, video games, comic books.
Talk about stuff that interests us, and makes us happy.
Yeah, but again, you're in it. What are your thoughts?
I mean, people who know me personally know I have very, very strong opinions about many, many things, and I feel like there's the lack of respect for the scene is what comes out the most in this stuff, and in anything, and not even just gaming. It's like if you have something good and you think that you can just get away with anything, no repercussions, and then all of a sudden society starts like changing. Now everybody's worried. Oh my God, what did I say in a message here and there? Like you gotta like, basically like review your like history and like your tweets and everything. And um, I really think that this it is a phase right now with the over scrutinizing of what people do, but the people who have done things that have hurt people, it's that stuff is probably not going to go away. That part of it won't, but the people will eventually move on and like try to actually have a community again. I really just I don't like how it affects the whole community. Like I can't stand when I see somebody post like um the whole community is like responsible for like whatever is going on. Like, and this is again like maybe like more like a few years ago I would see this more, but like, oh God, this community, it's like, no, it's like this is like a person. Like these are individuals who are doing this, even if it's like a group of TOs who are all conspiring on something. Like it's that group of people, it's not the whole scene. It's terrible to like lump all that into just the behavior of, I don't know, gamers. Like I really don't know like why people do that, but you see it all the time. It's like, calm down. This is about specific people. But the enabling though, that's another thing. That's just it's more of it's definitely going to come out. I guarantee that. That's no doubt about that.
In the last few years, um, you still do big events, but I've also noticed you do a lot of smaller events around Jersey. A quarterly report. I believe you do some Comic Cons. Are you going to be winding down and only basically doing classic MK? Because that's still a lot of people say, of course, and it's your bread and butter. It's like Shock is here, UMK3, MK2 is here. You said it yourself, MKX, MK11. You love the series, but those games, they're just not fun. Is that what you're going to be doing? If Big E calls, hey, Shock, could you please come and help us, stream MK11 or whatever iteration of Injustice there is? You're basically there more to run UMK3, aren't you, and MK2, because that's what you love.
So really, for me, I guess since MK9, we've just had classic MK available. It's basically just it's there. It's people. We know there's going to be a handful of people who want to play, no matter what. If we can squeeze a setup in here, we get it going. I'll take a time out from the stream and go look and see. And there's always a couple people playing. So as long as that's there and I can go and get like a couple games here and there, I'm gonna still do it. But in terms of like running a stream, I think that will still be my focus. Supplying the equipment and stuff if need be. I know that he's really got a lot of his own stuff now, and he doesn't really need us too much anymore in terms of that. But it helps him though if I bring 8 setups for MK and 8 monitors. He don't have to worry about that. He can put that more towards other games that maybe he needs a little bit more for and didn't really didn't really think he would. So that's all still going to be there. And as long as we have tournaments, I'll be there. My personal thing though is like I won't come back until everything is normal again. I will not be a part of all the stuff that's going on in any way. I don't want to make people uncomfortable. And I also don't want to be uncomfortable. So I'm very fair about it, but you probably won't see me back until everything is as it was. And if it's not, then you may not see me back again. So I don't know.
Well, I'm hoping not, because I love, when you have any UMK3 things, when I'm able to make it down there. Tom Brady, one of the community's favorite human beings.
Trash. Look at that name.
Why do people not like him?
He's a strong personality. I didn't like him. When I first met him, he was talking trash about my friend who's playing UMK3, not knowing that I was like his friend. It's Brady. That's how Brady is. And I gotta tell you, he is way calmer than he was 20 years ago. I mean, it's night and day, and people still are like, "Whoa, what is Brady doing?" he's he's a longtime brother for me in the community. I know people who they ask me, they'll be like what is he doing? Why does he do this? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't want to be one of those people who's like, oh, you got to accept somebody for who they are. You don't. If you don't like them, then don't deal with them. But I don't know. Like, we again, like I've used this phrase before in interviews in particular because Brady always comes up. We're like the Professor X and Magneto of the NRS scene. So like you have like the Professor X who wants the gamers to get along with everyone and be a part of society. If you want to crunch that down a little bit specifically, just say like have the NRS scene. They're like the mutants, and they're the ones that need to like be one with the community. And then you have like the Magneto, who's like the Brady back in the day. Not so much anymore because he came around on this, but he was just very, very centric on the NRS. I guess Midway at the time.
Yes.
Being like the focus, the most important thing. But then when MK9 came about and we actually started having something, he was just like, this is amazing. Like, this is what I've always wanted. And we've never had this. We've never had the chance to shine in the community before. And he really just, he changed a lot at that point, I would say. I don't talk to him too much. I talked to him maybe like a month or two ago. He like I said, he does what he does, and he's not going to change. I mean, like I said, he has gotten better, but he still does like go back to his bread and butter, so to speak.
To finish off this interview, I figured let's have a little lightning round here. Let's do word association. I'm gonna name some people. You give me a word to describe them. Crazy Dominican.
Brother.
Rio.
Bastard. So annoying to play.
He's ridiculously talented.
And Crazy Dominican is too, but Rio, oh my God, he just knows what you're gonna do before you're gonna do it. Ugh.
Who is the better between the two?
Better
in UMK3.
Better overall player, probably Crazy Dominican, but better fighting game player. Sorry. Better UMK3 player, Crazy Dominican. Better fighting game player, Rio. So if you have either one of those, you can beat me. So that's that's basically the difference.
Dark Rob.
Sweetheart.
Maxter.
That's a tough one. I know I don't know Maxter so well. He's jeez, that's a tough one. I don't really have like an instant
16-bit.
Bothersome.
Summoning.
Inspirational.
9.95 Phil. Elder God.
995 Phil. Confusing.
Storms.
Passionate.
CD Jr.
Where is he?
James MK.
Old.
L.I. Joe.
Great person.
What's his name? The dude down from Venezuela. Paulo is his name? The UMK3 player?
There's a bunch of them.
Well, the top one down there. He's the one always putting up. I think his name is Polo, isn't it? Or what the
I don't
heck
know.
is his
There's
name?
the guy. I know there's a guy who's like heralded as the best. I believe he goes by Speed. Is that the guy?
No. I'm thinking of somebody else. He must be new. I really haven't heard of him.
There's like a handful. There's like 3 or 4 guys that I go back with like 15, 20 years. Like Ninja Grinder and RZP. Those guys. Hanzo.
That's
Those
his name.
guys.
I'm sorry. His name is Hanzo. That's who I'm thinking of.
Um, no, the word just escaped me. Persistent,
Juggernaut.
misguided.
And Shock, thank you very much. It was a great
problem.
interview. I really want to do a follow-up because I'm sure we didn't hit on a lot of things. You're an interesting guy, and trust me, guys, this is only the first episode with this man. We haven't even gotten into his wrestling career.
Oh boy.
Shock, where could people reach you? What are your social media outlets?
UMK Shock on Twitter. UMK Shock. I think that's my Facebook URL. I mean, you can go to KombatNetwork.com. There's some links on there. We haven't really updated it much. Hasn't been much of a reason to in recent time. I mean, you could check out the Twitch stream. I'm gonna try to get on more. So twitch.tv/Kombat Network. We don't really have like a Discord or anything. We're gonna start trying to get a little more active again, especially because Summoning's been streaming a lot on our channel. That's the current goal, is to really get, I want to start streaming like the retro stuff again. So you can see me on there when I'm doing that. But Facebook's a good place, or Twitter. That's about it.
Listen, man, thank you very much for being on the show. Again, I look forward to doing a follow-up episode with you. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Have yourself a good evening. Guys, have yourself a great evening as well. Love you. Take care. See you next time.
Thank you, guys.